This week on Gravel, we jump into the big social issues of the day, and we talk about razors and toxic masculinity, and of course, why can't we shoot ducks in the spring? We covered all this week on Gravel.
Well, good afternoon, America, and welcome to another episode of On Gravel. You have found your way through the meandering roads of the netherworld to a fun conversation with Andrew McKean, that's me, Brian Bronson, that's him, and Eric Dinger, and that's the other him.
Hey.
You know, I feel obligated. This is a little Garrison Keillor-esque, I suppose, to just talk about the weather at the top of the show, and winter finally got here. If this hasn't pushed ducks out of our country, I don't know what will. It's 7 degrees above zero with a 30-mile-an-hour wind right out of the north. The interesting thing about this year's duck season is, which just ended, goose season ended yesterday, our duck season ended January 3rd. So I'm happy to donate what remaining waterfowl we have here. But interestingly, I've got some friends in southern Canada. They said they have held geese and ducks both on the South Saskatchewan River all hunting season. That's pretty unusual. So anyway, we're due to give up our bounty.
All right, I got a duck question for you two. This is not a dad joke, though. I did start it like one. I have an idea. $100, one duck, Drake duck, trophy duck tag. You can buy as many as you want. You can only shoot a Drake, and they're valid the rest of the year when it's not actual duck season.
So a plumage hunt.
A trophy hunt.
So a spring hunt.
Yeah. You can shoot one Drake.
Two questions. Does that bounty, which is kind of what I'd call it, go into a special fund for any specific management? Does it just go into the general duck fund? And secondly, why not limit the number? That seems a little irresponsible.
Okay. So I've thought about that. I think handicap accessibility is nearly impossible in duck hunting. I think you could do something like making accessible state-owned and rentable duck blinds. I think you could put it toward mentoring. You could put it toward programs for habitat or access. So yeah, I don't think you need to cap it, because I don't think you can hurt ducks by shooting single drakes in the fall or in the spring. And I do think that it should be earmarked for something that the people who would want to pay that kind of premium for a single duck would be excited to pay that for.
Could use a rifle. The reason I ask that is there is some precedent for this. There is basically a taxidermy sage grouse hunt. I think it's on the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming. You can hunt in the spring. You can actually hunt with a .22. And the limit is 1 there. And it's a pretty high price tag. Anyway, while we're, throwing open barriers and boundaries, I'll just throw that out. Maybe it's a rimfire hunt.
Huh, I hadn't thought of that. Is that better? Is it better to shoot a duck with a 17 for taxidermy purposes?
I don't know about a 17.
Well, I don't know that I'd shoot a 17 because those bullets tend to blow up a little bit. I think you want to shoot a big solid .22 bullet that might expand a little bit but doesn't blow up. I mean, 17 HMRs are almost exclusively varmint bullets, so they'll tear a pretty good hole, which would be hard for the taxidermist to fix. So as we talk about our theoretical season that will never happen, and I know that that's the case. Well, maybe I'm being pessimistic, but when I worked for the Minnesota DNR back in the early 2000s, I kicked around the idea with the waterfowl guys at that time, and they were so opposed to it. And for them, it's what you often hear from wildlife agencies when you talk about something a little bit new and different. It would be a regulatory nightmare, is what they said. Because you'd have all these people out there, and how do you know they only shoot one? And what about all the disturbance during the breeding season? Those were all the things that were thrown up against it. Now, at the time, I was lusting after a full-color Drake shoveler like you wouldn't believe. I mean, I just think they were beautiful birds, and Now I haven't gotten a completely full color one, but I got a pretty good one last year in California. So my bloodlust for a spring shoveler on the way back north is diminished a little bit, but I still think the point's valid. I think the resource could withstand it, and I think there is a pent up demand for folks that really love ducks and would like to get things that are suitable for the wall. You know, long-tailed pintail is hard to get up north, but in the spring we see them. So I'm with you. I vote yes.
You satisfied, Dinger?
What do you think, Andrew?
Well, I do think it would be a regulatory nightmare. I think there would be a lot of issues with kind of the methods involved. Are you going to, that's one reason I asked the rimfire question. Are you going to be decoying lots and lots of birds and then picking out just that one? Or it's going to be a little more surgical? What's the impact on birds that are really trying to reserve calories to spend them during nesting? I don't know. I think it's an interesting idea, and I'm not against it, but I think there's lots of things to figure out.
Well, that was a rabbit hole. Sorry about that, but
I'd like to amend my answer. Since you started out with Garrison Keeler, and he's a Minnesotan, by the way, and I live on the shores of Lake Wobegon now, I'd like to say that down at the Heartland Cafe, we've been talking about that idea for many, many years. And Sven and Oli both think it's a great idea. And they've actually been doing it for years, but, you know, they haven't been caught by the game warden yet. But,
You know,
they
you.
haven't been caught by the game warden because, all of our women are beautiful and all of our children are above average.
I think your women are hardy,
Well,
which
you
is
can
a
get
nice
over the
thing to
hairy
say.
legs from all the cold.
One way around this is to just go to Louisiana, where I didn't shoot it, but my hunting partner shot the most fully plumed, most beautiful drake shoveler I've ever seen. I was lusting after that bird, and every pintail we shot was sprigged out like you can't believe. So, I mean, I think the opportunity does exist now within the structure of the flyway and regulatory frameworks, but whatever. Everybody likes a
But
cheater.
as a northerner who has spent my entire life annoyed by the fact that all of the waterfowl regulations benefit the southerners to our detriment, giving us a spring season would give us an opportunity up here to shoot one of those beautiful birds that we look at in the spring while we're sitting out in a freezing cold mud puddle trying to kill snow geese. You see all those birds flying over you. Yeah, I see those long sprigs and well, one of the things that's pretty cool is widgeon. You don't realize how much longer the tail is on a widgeon this time of year compared to when you shoot them in October, November. I mean, there's a lot of birds that are significantly different at this time of year as they're preparing their breeding season than they are even during the migration. So um, I think there's some cool opportunities. And let's face it, Audubon would be in favor of it because Audubon, the organization that the bird lovers, the preservationists all talk about now. Audubon painted all of those birds because he killed them first. And so within the waterfowler and wildlife biology community, the term to Audubon something means to go out and shoot it. So let's have a spring Audubon season. Now I'm marketing, guys.
What else you got, Dinger?
Well, I was gonna bring up. There's a bunch of fervor on the internet and in my life amongst my friends and my wife about an ad that dropped earlier in the week and has subsequently gone viral. The best wishes of the best marketer is to have their ad go viral. I'm not sure this one did what they intended to have it do, or maybe it did. You probably, Mr. Listener, Brian, we could call him. Brian wrote, says, "I think I'm your listener." Uh, you probably know we're talking about the Gillette ad in which they talk about the Me Too movement and they use phrases like toxic masculinity and really seek to call men to a better level of behavior, a better level of decorum, than at least the way they present the men in that ad. And certainly there are examples of men like that in all of our lives, and men want to do some of the things they portrayed. But I'd be curious you guys' take on, do we live in a toxic masculine culture? Is that ad just doing the job for a razor company, or is it a political statement that pisses you off, or that you agree with? What do you think, Andrew? What's your thought?
Well, kind of all of the above. Yeah, I think there's elements of our culture that are toxically masculine. I think there's something to say. I think this Me Too movement was not accidental. I think it was ripe. I think it's been overdone, but I'm hardly the first person to say that. And I mean, this ad, I know what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to be edgy, so to speak. It's a razor company. They were.
I give that 4 kins.
They were trying to be provocative. I think they went too far, is my take on it. And I won't sort of deconstruct the ad, but my greatest complaint with my heretofore greatest complaint with Gillette is just how ridiculously overpriced they were. My new complaint with Gillette is I feel like there was no nuance, and honestly, not as I think strong a call to action as is required for the times. That said, I look at myself as sort of patient zero in this thing, and I have a 14-year-old daughter. I have a wife. I care very much about their interaction with the wider world, and there are some serious problems with it. On the other hand, this is, I think, the blunt force trauma of that ad. It really painted every man as a potential offender. And I think that's what was deeply offensive to me. And I think if you start to read some of the comments, I think that's what's deeply offensive to a lot of people.
Well, I think they should value your opinion more than most people because you probably go through a razor a day. Not a black barbed wire coming off of that face.
Well, I've been a loyal Mach 3 customer for probably a decade since we realized that three blades are better than two, or whenever that happened. So I've been using a Mach 3 for a long time. Have loved the razor. Yes, they're ridiculously expensive. It's crazy. I didn't really pay too close attention to the ad when it first came out, in part because I think it blew up a little bit on Twitter and a little bit on Fox News, and those are both two of my trigger points that I'm trying to avoid, so that I'm less outraged this year. But I did take a look at the ad earlier this week because my wife had mentioned to me that she was going to sign me up for the Dollar Shave Club, because she was annoyed by the ad. And and she's a strong, liberated professional woman, but she's a little bit like me in that we remember the pre-political world when we used to make decisions about who our friends were based on whether we liked them or whether they lived near us or whether we shared, some activity in common. And before the days when, well, you're not allowed to be friends with them because they're in the wrong political party. And so this just feels like it's one more of those nails in the coffin of everything has to be viewed through a political lens. And you can talk about Me Too movement being necessary, and it is. And look, I've done some toxically masculine things in my days that I am not proud of. I've done and said offensive things that I'm ashamed of now, um, and I don't excuse those as boys will be boys. There were bad choices in the past, and in no doubt I will make bad choices in the future. That being said, this 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 wokeness that is coming out from the progressive left that is, I mean, there's a war on a traditional masculine sentiment. I mean, we've seen I see it in schools and I see it in other places where, you know, perfectly healthy traditional masculine traits are being demonized, and being equated with, you know, if you're a male, then you're a rapist, or if you know, things like that. So this this reaction to the ad, and it's been overwhelmingly negative from what I can see online, is, I guess, not surprising. And it probably breaks down generational lines. I don't know. Maybe the millennials think it's great. I don't know. Um, but I wasn't ecstatic about the ad. Uh, I thought the razors were great, but Dollar Shave Club razors, I guess, are probably just as good and cheaper, and they're not going to try to cram some political message down my throat where it doesn't need to be. So
Well, if they
that's what
were,
I've
they
got to
aren't
say
going to
about that.
now. Well,
So
my
part
my
of that,
background is. Oh, go ahead, Andrew. I'm sorry.
no. I was going to take it another way, but I want to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, so some of my background is in advertising, and this is kind of a manifesto type video. I actually love that part of it. The best a man can be, I think, is a really cool thought. As far as the ad goes, there's some brilliance to it in that I think, in general, women will like it more than men, and I would bet women probably buy 80 some percent of the razors out there. Sounds ridiculous, but think about who buys groceries in your house. Grocery bills are, at one time 5 or 6 years ago, I read they were 91% female. So if you're buying razors at the grocery store or Target, it's probably your wife buying them. So there's a stroke of brilliance in it in there. I wanted to kind of talk about this through the lens of our purview on the world and the topic of our podcast in hunting. And I will say, even just recently, my wife would tell you a story of a pheasant hunt back home in Minnesota where she came out the door with my sister-in-law to join our family in our family hunt, and we had invited some friends along. And one of the guys in the hunting party said, "Oh, there's going to be girls today?" Kind of in a semi-condescending way, maybe a little flippantly, probably not, ill-willed or not trying to be rude, but just one of those things that, in an environment where a woman maybe isn't quite as comfortable anyways, probably one of those things that just doesn't need to be said. And I think all three of us, as we talked before the show, all three of us are really sensitive to that because we see very much the value of Andrew bringing your daughter out and me bringing my daughters out and my wife being a hunter and your wife being a hunter. I hope that the hunting industry is getting woke, and I think it is. I think that, whether that had anything to do with Me Too or a decline in hunting licenses and a chance to bring a family along as a chance to sell more hunting licenses, I don't know. Or maybe we're seeing, Julie McKean and people like that are women that are making their way in the outdoor industry while hunting. Maybe those are examples that young girls are seeing and seeing a little bit of themselves in. I'd just be curious of you guys' take. I mean, the ad was brilliant in that it made us talk about it, it made us feel, it made us think, it made people react. Do I think that there's a war on manhood and that we're, as as the man show people back in the day used to say, we're pussifying America? Yeah, I think that's a real thing. I think that, being a traditional conservative male, as I grew up with, isn't in vogue and isn't as, quote unquote woke or politically correct as it used to be. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can be all that is a man and all that has been a man, and also pay attention to the words you use, and also be better at the workplace, and don't be an a-hole when you don't, when it's not called for when you're with your friends. I think those are good evolutions in what it means to be a man. But I do agree with you, Andrew, that the ad and this movement can come across to a otherwise well-intended guy as being insulting and derivative.
Well, I'm going to disagree with one thing you said there, Andrew,
Okay.
or I'm sorry, Eric, is that I don't think that the hunting community can become more woke, because if you look at the progressive left and the people that own that whole term of being woke, they don't have room in their community for people who use guns or who kill animals. I, I we might not, hunting and shooting might not be first and foremost in everybody's agendas there, but the intersectionality political realm doesn't have room for those things. So I don't think hunters should try to be woke. I think hunters should realize that you shouldn't be a jerk. You shouldn't be a dick. And there's room in the woods and in the boats and in the prairies for women to join us. And it's also okay to have boys' weekends the same way it's okay to have girls' weekends. But the hunting community can't just be what the stereotype is of a bunch of drunk bubbas running around in pickup trucks, farting and telling dirty jokes and, and shooting animals off the side of the road. I mean, we need to break all of those stereotypes because while the, those exist some places, that's not overall what our community is. And I think we can embrace not being a dick, and we can embrace being accepting of people and tolerant of people without embracing what the virtue signaling that is part of that ad, which is,
Yeah.
there's one way to live, and if you don't fit this narrow definition that we've got on this from this political realm, eventually there's no room for you. So just
Yeah.
change or there's no room for you in America, and that's kind of, there's an intolerance that exists on the political left today that is every bit as horrendous as the intolerance that once was associated with the political right. Um, and this woke movement is part of it. They don't, and they don't like guys who shoot guns and kill animals.
Yeah, and I think you can. I think that's a fair point. I would flip it on its head and challenge our listener to think about that two ways. So yeah, maybe being woke means that you're a vegetarian or you're vegan or whatever, and maybe in that sense there isn't room for the hunting culture. But I would say most people that would even utter the term woke, which I don't know that I ever have before today. Um, I think most people probably do eat meat and probably live in an urban area where they've just never been invited, and that's one of the things that I really harp on at Powderhook is just because somebody wears a suit to work and prefers Ferragamo to Timberland or to Irish Setter doesn't mean that they wouldn't enjoy the hell out of a great day outside. And one of the things that our industry needs to think about is just because somebody is woke doesn't mean they don't get to come with us. And just because somebody virtue signals, or just because somebody is liberal or gay or different, doesn't mean at all that that's mutually exclusive from hunting. It probably means first that they weren't invited. Now, if they're invited and don't enjoy it and don't care to do it again, yeah, okay. But I would guess that most people that have a problem with hunting and guns and the way we do things do so out of pure naivety, out of pure puppeting what they're hearing from other people, not having ever experienced it themselves. And the simplest way, the only way that I know of to change the way somebody feels about something is to help them experience it, and that takes an invite from somebody in our.
Well,
I
I'd like
totally
to
agree. But
invite
I do think there's a bear. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go, Andrew. I was just going to make a smart ass remark.
I do think there's a perception barrier that people who are not in what they might from the outside look at as a kind of exclusive toxic masculine club of hunters for wrong, I believe, and I think we all believe, but I think that is a prevailing image that we haven't done enough to destroy. And I think that's what you're saying, Eric, is like it's up to all of us to, and same with Bronson, is the don't be a dickisms of be inclusive, invite more people, and don't reinforce the stereotype that I think we all are aware of what that is. We don't necessarily participate in it, but I think we know what that stereotype of ourselves and our subculture is. I think it's up to all of us to to destroy it, or replace it with something a little more inclusive.
So my hope, guys, is that by the time that this podcast hits the air, that this issue is blown away and nobody's even thinking or talking about it anymore. And I hope it's not because we've moved on to the next new crisis that the whole country is gonna panic about, or the next crazy thing that the president said. I hope this is just one of those things that blows up on social media for a couple days and goes away, because I don't think I don't think it's constructive overall. Other than to bring attention. There's some marketing guy that's either really happy or really scared right now working for Gillette.
Maybe Gillette's just, this is all a big strategy. They're going to drop a woman's razor any day.
They have them.
Well, I think
Another one.
I think a men's razor can work as a woman's razor. You just need to choose to identify it as a woman's razor and just use it.
Have you ever shaved with a designated woman's razor before? Like, obviously
I have
pink or some, like, has some sort of Venus name.
I have had to shave my face a couple times when I was out of razor blades and needed one. They don't work as well on my face as one would hope, but I mean, look, I don't have this tangle of Scottish fur on my face like you do, Andrew, so it's pretty easy to shave my face.
I mean, I can shave my face with a dull pocket knife. I have 7 total facial hairs.
Well, the only reason I left Gillette was because steel chainsaws worked better on mine.
Speaking of that, this
which,
episode's going to come out during SHOT Show. Andrew, please dish for our user what is going to happen to your facial hair at SHOT Show. You got plans?
Oh, I hate to say this. I'm a little embarrassed about this. I shaved my beard last week. It just was getting nasty, and I was like, I don't know what to do with it. I was going to do something creative, but that's what everybody expects. And so a little bit of this was just to throw, just kind of keep people on their toes a little bit. I'm going to clean shave my face every single day.
You should tell.
Now, I might let a day go.
While we're on the topic, Andrew, you got to tell the nail and beard hairs to each other story.
Yeah, so, well, it goes far back, but yeah, all right. So I am in debt. I'm well endowed.
We need to issue a trigger warning that you are about to hear a toxically masculine story. Okay, continue.
Well, the only way to start is to just, for those who've not seen a picture of me or maybe had a bro hug where I brushed against their fair skin, I am well endowed with facial hair. I can't explain it, except that it's probably from my outer Hebrides, lineage. It's dark, it's wiry, and it grows fast. And so the first time I did this, I was in college. I grew a beard in college, and actually this is a whole other story, but I was detained by the Italian authorities in the port city of Brindisi because of my beard. So my beard has been getting me in trouble for years. So when I came back from, it was over winter break of my senior year in college, and I just couldn't deal with my beard anymore, and so I shaved it. When you have the facial hair in the quantity that I do, you're kind of left with sort of a disposal problem. What do you do with this bag of hair? And that was the first time I decided I would just mail it to somebody. So out of the blue, I put it in an envelope, manila envelope. It was just a regular old letter envelope, was not going to do it, and mailed it to my friend Doug. No note, no nothing. He still is traumatized. And then,
it sounds like a bioweapon.
So last year at SHOT Show, so I don't know if I have mentioned this on the air before, but I went to Kodiak Island on a hunt. It was going to be for caribou and the black-tailed deer, and we were going to fish, and we had plans to hunt ducks, except we found out when we got there the duck season wasn't going to open for another week. So anyway, one by one, our opportunities dwindled. But before they did, we figured, God, we've got all of this bounty before us, and we should have some sort of a bet based on the amount of critters that we all shoot. And so we had a whole point system based on the number and the sex of deer. I think a doe was 1 and a buck was 2. The caribou we figured was 5 because they were just such. That was going to be the deal maker or breaker for that. Each duck was half a point, something like that. I can't remember. And each fish over a certain length was a point. So anyway, we kept score on the back of a paper plate on the back of the boat we were living on, and we got to the last day, and we realized that it was basically a virtual tie, but we realized that we didn't know what we were playing for. So we decided that here was the deal. Whoever won the bet had to come to SHOT Show the following year with a mustache. So now that we had something to shoot for, nobody wanted to win. So we were deliberately trying to shoot does instead of bucks. Well, I shot what I thought was a doe. It ended up being a little 4-cornered buck, and so I won by 1 point. And it was actually a 1-pointed buck, so literally by 1 point. So I was kind of dwelling what to do. I grew my beard out big, and then I got to SHOT Show with a big full beard, and all of my, the people I was on the boat with who had made the bet were beside themselves with rage. Like, that's not a mustache, McKean. What are you doing? I really didn't know what to do because I look pretty foul with a mustache. The beard kind of works a little bit, but the mustache is just hideous. I look very sneaky and felonious. So, but I realized I had to come through with this whole thing, and so I'm like, well, what the hell? I'm just going to do it. And I started removing facial hair, starting at my sideburns, and started whacking away at this thing. And all of a sudden, I realized, holy smokes, I got a big old walrus mustache of a gunslinger brocade here. So that's what I did. But I basically had this. I don't know what you'd even call it. It was horrible, just horrible. But with the leavings, I was going to dinner with my friend Steve McGrath, and I put it all in a pouch, a little envelope, and I told him, this is for you, but I don't want you to open it until you get home. And it just looks like a pocket of pubic hair. I'm just going to be honest with you. And so I didn't know what was going to happen, but I tucked it into his suit jacket, into an inner pocket there, and just gave it a little pat and sent him on his way. Well, he got home and he opened it. He figured it was something special, maybe from Steve was on that Kodiak trip, maybe something from Alaska or whatever. He opened it up in the presence of his kids, and yeah, they're scarred too. But he got the last laugh because the next time I saw him was in the summertime, and he gave me a little box, and he tucked it in my shirt pocket and tapped it and said, "Don't open this till you get home." He had tied a dozen flies with my beard hair.
Well played. Two things from that story. One, so the whole reason you came to SHOT Show looking like a crazy man was because you couldn't identify your target and shot a buck instead of a doe. That's one.
This is your optics
and
editor,
number two,
ladies and gentlemen.
If you say you were shooting a Bushnell scope, I'll come through this phone and get you. No, number two, I thought that after you shaved and still had that great bushy mustache, I thought you were trying to look like the Lorax from Dr. Seuss. That was honest to God what I thought you were shooting for. That's all I got.
Well, while we're on this topic of both toxic masculinity and body hair, I've got a story for you that is kind of from the old archives of outdoor life. There's a fella, he's pretty famous in our world, at least in our world in Africa. His name is Kevin Robertson. You might know him because he wrote an interesting book on shot placement for dangerous game. Fascinating guy. He was a longtime PH. He's got a veterinarian's degree. He's done a lot of great work in Africa with big game. But he reached out to me when I was the editor-in-chief of Outdoor Life and asked if he could write a column. So I said, well, we don't really have a lot of space for, first person or perspective pieces, but give me a few, samples so I can evaluate your writing. They're actually pretty good. And so I think he ended up writing a total of 3 or 4 of these kind of Our Man in Africa pieces, but he submitted one that I was unable to approve. And it was the story of, he did a lot of fishing in Lake Victoria and around the Zambezi River country. And this was a story about the most mythic angler in southern Africa. This guy would win all of the fishing competitions that were going on. And apparently, there's a famous one in Lake Victoria, big pot of money for the winner, and he took it every year. Nobody could kind of figure out what in the world he was doing. It was a fly fishing contest, and finally, people started piecing together a few sort of curious details. One is every time he got to the fishing tournament venue, he became extremely fond of and spent a lot of time with this buxom, redheaded bartender at the local bar. And so that was the first sort of evidence of this. And the second one was he used the same fly all the time to catch these big fish. And finally, somebody confiscated his fly box, opened it up, and there was this pattern that was just, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was big and it was bushy, and he said, "Oh, you'd be talking about the woolly watch spring, would you?" He had a pattern that he had named the woolly watch spring, and he said, "I'm mighty proud of that. I don't think there's anything untoward about this behavior at all. It catches fish." Enough said. But people started to deduce the connection between these two things, and finally he admitted that it was the pubic hair of the barmaid.
And you didn't publish that?
It was brilliantly written. I still have a copy of it somewhere. I'll try to share it with you at some point. But the woolly watch spring.
Toxic masculinity.
Hey, I just bring themes together. That's really what I feel like I do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you were to bring a theme together, I think you would need to recall the state park mustache conversation from previously.
I don't recall what you're talking about.
Using a parcel of ground owned by a governmental entity, which would you use to describe your mustache at the last SHOT Show?
My mustache? Oh.
Mine was State Park Masturbator. What was yours?
Grand Teton. Oh, that's how it's pronounced, right?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
No
comment.
Okay, then. Do you guys remember what happened last time that topic came up? No comment.
You got, yeah. Which is why I brought it up again.
Mm-hmm. My wife was upset more because I went back to it and used it in the intro than she was about the fact that it came up and you guys talked about it. She didn't think I should glorify your guys' toxic masculinity, so I'm not going to this time.
Yeah, and it did. It was edging toward that. But self-awareness is really the greatest quality I think that humans possess. And Dinger, I'm happy that your self-awareness kicked in and you got rid of that nasty thing on your upper lip.
If yours was a mustache, mine was something sub-mustache, but slightly above a prepubescent teenager.
There's a tradition at Outdoor Life that departing editors are given a fake cover with all sorts of fake cover lines. And so when I left Outdoor Life, I was given a fake cover that is me with my dog, my previous lab Willow. But one of the cover lines, and there's a little insert photo of me and that horrible mustache, and the cover line is something like, here's to facial hair and not having the self-awareness to know when it's time to get rid of it. Or I think it was something like a creepy mustache and the oblivion not to get rid of it, or something like that. It was a creepy mustache, but I kept the damn thing for months afterward.
Huh.
You just owned it.
I owned it.
Well, I think it's cool that there's a tradition of making fake covers like that. Did you make a fake masthead? Did Krebsy get onto the masthead finally?
She this is only the cover. Had there been a page 2 or 3, I'm sure she would have been in there. Veronica Krebsy, was that it?
Veronica Krebsy, yeah. So I don't know if Dinger's ever heard the story, but when I was in Africa a couple of years ago, I was hunting with Natalie Krebs, who writes and edits for Outdoor Life, and she was with me, and I didn't realize that the politics of who's on the masthead in the magazine and everything was such a big deal. I've never been in the publishing world, so I didn't realize that. And so I'd gotten, I don't know, a red hartebeest or something that day, and we had Wi-Fi coverage in Africa, and I had texted back to Andrew and told him, hey, got this hartebeest. It was awesome. I said something about, Krebs being in the masthead. I didn't even know she wasn't in the masthead, but apparently it was a grand topic of discussion that I didn't realize I had stumbled into a nest of bees, and so I got to hear about it both in Africa and then when I got back. So I see, these are the things that I like to usually own when I'm offending somebody, but occasionally you stumble into it and do it by accident.
Well, so your challenge to Krebs was to sneak in Veronica Krebsy as her name on the masthead, and you this is the length of your shadow. Is she felt obligated to do it, and so she got in the file where the should be under some sort of a 24-hour guard, but she opened up the file that contains all of the masthead detail, and she put in Veronica Krebsy. Well, as part of the editorial process, each element of the magazine goes through rounds through each of the editors to mark up and edit. And this one was printed out, and it made it through, I think, one round before the managing editor got hold of it and absolutely hung Veronica Krebsy out to dry. How dare you? How dare you enter the sacrosanct, world of the masthead and make these changes without consulting anybody? I think Krebs's weak excuse was, well, I consulted Bronson. I didn't go very far.
Well, she is
Well,
officially my social media consultant, so that's a pretty critical role that she has, and so it doesn't pay anything. So I'm glad that Bonnier is able to get the bills paid so that she can do that in her spare time and help me build up my vast social media array. Speaking of which, if you're interested in following me on Instagram, I'm at Bronson Ryan. She said I should say things like that on the air so that people know how to find me.
she's getting her done.
There you go.
Dinger, what are you on Instagram?
Powderhook is at Powderhook, and I am at Eric Dinger. Powderhook is probably the one to follow unless you really want to see pictures of my family. I do have a cool family.
It's a cute family.
I mean, it's they're my idiots. As my mom used to say, he's an idiot, but he's our idiot.
Well, with that, we're going to get to see each other next week and pull off a podcast in real time, real space, and real good humor. I think we have a dichotomous question to send us out. Is that right, Dinger?
I think so. So, it's the micro question. Are you going to send your kids? Let's say they had no opinion on the matter, which is never the case, but if kids had no opinion on the matter, would you send them to college, knowing what you know right now, or would you send them to a 2-year school?
Well, this is pretty relevant for me because I've got twin high school seniors who are looking at college next year. So it's hard to be hypothetical about it, but I will tell you this. One of my guilty pleasures when I travel is buying the New York Times. There's, this bastion of progressive liberalism and sometimes unprogressive liberalism, but
They're woke.
For a journalist, there is nothing better than seeing good writing at that scale. Every section, every page, there's just something to read in it, and I love that about it. It's a fun way to spend time when I travel. But last week, coming back from Louisiana, I've got a copy of the New York Times, and on the front page was a headline that said, "In rural colleges, no future in history degrees." I have a history degree from a rural college. So, So it definitely caught my eye. The piece was actually pretty interesting. It was a look really at University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, which I know for natural resource management and biologists, it's a really great program there. It's a pretty famous school, but it
Where
was
it's what
really
I
looking at
recommend when people ask me where to go to school. That's where I tell them.
great school.
Hmm.
But they've got a real budget crunch, largely because in a lot of America, these mid-sized rural colleges were built for a population that doesn't exist anymore, and those are the people in surrounding towns and kind of the regional college. As they said in the story, now University of Wisconsin Madison is where a lot of the kids go who are in-state kids going to school, and so they've got some real enrollment issues, and consequently they've got some real budget issues. So they're looking at getting rid of a lot of their liberal arts programs. I do think that's an issue. It certainly is here in Montana with the University of Montana. They're cutting a lot of the humanities programs. There's a lot to be said for vocational education, and I think going forward, there's a lot to be said for having a workforce that is coming out of college knowing what to do. But I really am an advocate for a liberal arts education, well-rounded, deep background in the humanities and writing, and giving you a skill set that transcends a single job. My boys are they're really looking at, I think, a combination of those. They're pretty interested in medicine. They don't really want to go through a pre-med track as an undergraduate, but they're already starting to look. They're pretty ambitious kids and pretty smart kids. They get it from their mom, but they're looking at maybe we go through a organic chemistry or a biology undergrad program that kind of gets us on the right track for a medical degree as a graduate student. That's real vocational thinking to my mind. So anyway, I think it's possible to do both, but I've talked long enough.
Well, I asked the question, and I'll just add this tidbit before you answer, Bronson. But they made a vocational high school here in Lincoln. I was actually a part of the team that helped kind of make it a thing, and it's a program designed to increase graduation rates in high school by giving kids a chance to earn certificates in areas that they're passionate about. So it's kind of a cool idea. Lincoln was trying to get their graduation rate up over 90%. And this my neighbor boy was over the other day, loves powder hook, big hunter and fisherman, so he likes to come by. And he said that his friend, who's a year older than him, high school senior, graduated with a welding certificate from Lincoln's vocational high school and got an $80,000 union job offer from the railroad. So that's why I brought it up. Is there are not very many entry level jobs in natural resources where you're going to make $80,000, or frankly, business degrees out of places like the University of Nebraska where you're going to make $80,000 coming out of college with $100,000. Not necessarily debt, but you've paid $100,000 for your education. A good starting business degree job in Lincoln, Nebraska is $50,000. So this young man's a high school senior and got an $80,000 job offer. So anyway, that's why I asked, Bronson, what do you think?
Well, I'm the first person in my family from both sides to go to college. Neither one of my parents, none of their siblings went to college. I guess there was one business college administrative assistant on my dad's side of 13. So I come from a really blue collar agricultural family, and so my dad worked in a factory. My mom had a high school degree and worked as a paraprofessional in her whole life. So coming into that, the idea of college was always kind of abstract for me. My parents expected it of me, and I had good grades, and my brother and I both were expected that we were going to go to college because it was the early 90s, and that's what you did. That was the next step. And so I went to college. Now, I went to a school in northern Minnesota that, based on what I wanted to do with my career, probably wasn't the best move because it certainly wasn't a program that was prestigious and things. But I kind of felt like when I was there, I got a liberal arts education, even though I was a hard science. I was a biology with a wildlife emphasis major. But I was active in student government and took humanities classes and philosophy classes and embraced that and loved it. Um, and while I'm certainly no intellectual, I certainly like to read the works of real intellectuals. And so the idea of a liberal arts college, I think for me is important because I think learning how to broaden your mind and think is important. And my wife, brilliant scholar, she went to a rural liberal arts college and got a degree in philosophy. So I bet that career track was dead when she was taking it, 40, 30 years ago. So, 25 years ago. I don't want to age it
Yeah,
too
I was
much.
like, oh, geez, you mean 15 years ago?
But but the in so I know that she really embraces liberal arts colleges as well. But the thing is, what I love about the idea of a liberal arts education is this mind expansion and complex thoughts and disagreeing thoughts. And I just don't think that exists very much in college campuses anymore. The thought police that exists now, and we're going back to where we kind of started from this whole discussion about the woke crowd. I mean, there's not a lot of diversity of thought. You're either all liberal or progressive, or you just keep your mouth shut because it just doesn't. There's not room for you on campus anymore, and bringing in diverse thinkers and um, that that makes me sad. It makes me sad for America, but it also makes me concerned about the education that my son's gonna go on to. I don't know that college is going to provide him the experience that I would hope you would get out of college. And so now I'm starting to think that there might be other tracks. So if I had to give you an answer right now, it'd be a liberal arts undergrad and then probably a specialized degree after that, because that's the track that my wife and I have followed, and it's been successful for us. But I don't know. I'm really drifting away from that. I see the value of learning to trade, like my dad and that whole generation ahead of me. I mean, I've got a family full of farmers and electricians, and they all made good lives and are good people, and you know, there's something to be said for that. So I guess I'm being wishy-washy, but if you're going to talk about intellectual, academic topics, you should expect that. So my dichotomous answer is college.
Well, mine's college too. My daughter is at the University of Nebraska, um, but I don't think it wasn't something that had the stigma, the 2 year college thing for her and I. In fact, I really pushed her hard to look at a couple of 2 year degrees because she just never loved school. She loves the social part of it. She loves the activities and the go-alongs, but she doesn't love academia. She doesn't love to sit and study. And so I pushed her to look at doing like a web development 2 year degree, or just I didn't try to push her any one direction, but I pushed her to look at it. She ended up choosing to go to the University of Nebraska and having the time of her life, like probably we all did. But I do think it's time to really, really shine a light on how successful of a life you can have going either direction. And so anyway, that's probably all we need to say about that. But a lot of our listeners, or our listener, as we like to say, probably come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and it's pretty cool. I will say this, that one of my best buddies, the listener I was telling you about earlier, he runs a plumbing company, and man, they cannot hire plumbers. So if you want a great life in Lincoln, Nebraska, with a 2 year degree and a job before you graduate, the trades are ripe for the picking right now. So, all right, with that, Andrew, what do you think?
I think you just sent that one straight down the toilet.
Four kins.
Four kins.
Okay, well, like I say, we'll be together next week, and we hope, dear listener, that you are with us. So until then, keep it on gravel, won't you?